Hey guys, today we continue studying the match between Botvinnik and Smyslov. I'm truly delighted you have enjoyed the first video. It got a lot of views just 1 hour after it was released, which is something that truly makes me happy. So let's continue. For some reason I have completely mixed things up. I was probably quite anxious yesterday and the game I showed yesterday was actually the game number 2. Now we are going to take a look at the game number 1. I hope you would not be disappointed with that little inaccuracy in the story. I would sort the videos in the playlist in the right way later on. Let's take a look. In this game, Smyslov had white pieces and Botvinnik had black pieces. The first game of the match. Moscow 1954. e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop b4, e5. Botvinnik actually revived the whole system with bishop to b4 and found a lot of great ideas in maneuver. So if you want to study this variation, you should definitely take a look at Botvinnik's games, e5, c5, a3, and nowadays, of course, the main line by far it has been bishop c3, bc3. Now black has a few moves. He can go knight d7 here. He can also continue queen c7. There are a few other rare continuations as well. But here, Botvinnik used the line which is called nowadays Armenian variation. He went bishop to a5, b4. That's a pawn sacrifice which was recommended by Alekhine back in the day. And here Alekhine had studied only the answer c takes b5, when after knight b5, b takes a3, for instance c3 or bishop d2. White gets tremendous pressure on black's position because he gets to take on a3, the knight ends up on d6. I have actually even tried this position myself as black for a few times, in blitz mostly, but never found it appealing or satisfying, so I would not really suggest that you go here. But instead the move cd4 is rather interesting. White and knight to b5, bishop to c7, f4, knight to e7, knight f3, knight c6. All the theory so far. There are a few moves for black, but let's not get in a lot of detail regarding the theoretical lines, bishop d3. And here black came up with a pretty interesting move, which actually consumes a lot of time. On the other hand, it's definitely very interesting strategically. So white just didn't have the time to take on c7 before, but overall he would definitely like to take this bishop at some point. So black tried to save it by going bishop to b8. Quite an interesting continuation. Knight d4, a6, bishop to e3, bishop to a7, castles. White tries to trade the dark squared bishop so that he would have the better control over the d4 square in the center, which is the key square, and he would try to get a favorable endgame. However, I think that instead of castling, it would have been better to go c3, keeping a chance to take on d4 with a pawn if black captures with the knight, pawn takes, and then white would have considerable chances to create an initiative or maybe get some attack on the king side, thanks to his massive space advantage. Also, please note that the bishop on a7 would have been rather misplaced in this case. Of course, you cannot really boast of this piece as black. But white castle takes, bishop takes, knight takes, queen b6. White could of course have gone c3, just king h1 instead was played. Of course, now black cannot capture on d4. Why? For those of you who haven't seen this pattern, I think it's definitely the time has definitely come to take a look, to learn it, because after queen d4 there is a simple idea of bishop b5, and the black queen is not protected. Black would lose the space, so white would win the queen. So black went bishop d7, c3, rook c8, and now white tried, or at least pretended, that he was trying to get more pieces on the king side and opt for some initiatives there. He could have, of course, simply protected the pawn with queen to d2, with rook to c1, but he went queen to e1 instead. What's the point? If castles, then white would have continued queen h4, threatening the knight, threatening mate, so say knight g6. Now white could simply take. And now with h6, I guess black is just getting mated after rook f3, rook h3, that's horrible. So fg6, but then rook f3 anyway, and white's initiative is rather tremendous here. So black went h6, taking white's idea into attention. And at this point, white went for a pretty risky continuation, which finally led or could have led him to a bit of a trouble. White could have simply continued with some normal positional moves, for instance, rook to c1. Maybe he could intend to go queen g3 at some point. Instead, he preferred to try and seize more space on the queen side by means of a4. The threat, of course, is to go a5. First of all, it would grab a lot of space. Secondly, if white manages to make this move, black would never liberate himself with b6 because the a pawn would be a huge weakness then. Also, importantly, since both sides have the light squared bishops, white tries to fix the pawns on the dark squares so that black's bishop would become quite a bad piece, since his pawns would be on the light squares. And the only move, and the move white counted on, was actually played. It's a5. White went knight to b3. That's the move that white relied on when he was playing a4. The point is that after a before c before, white would have a huge initiative on the queen side. The ideas could include knight c5 or a5, maybe actually a5, b5, a6, maybe rather knight c5, just keeping things stable. Of course, white's position would be extremely pleasant. He would have a big advantage after that. And after this move, however, things proved not to be as simple, and black came up with a strong answer, which questions white's idea. How should black continue? Black found a target and tried tackling it straight away with queen to c7, attacking the pawn on c3. The point is that after knight a5, say b6, knight b3, queen c3, the problem is the white knight is hanging and it cannot really go to c5, so black seems to be seizing the initiative here. Obviously, well, actually, it's not that easy for white to defend both pieces, and if the queen goes to d1, this pawn would be attacked, so it's not good. So white went knight c5, black went bishop to c6. Of course, he needs to be cautious, because if he just castled, white could have even considered the clumsy knight d5, knight d7, queen d7, ba5. Black would still Black would still need to find ways how to get his pawn back, because white has some ideas like a6. Well, black can get the pawn back for sure, but probably he wouldn't count on any advantage here. He went bishop to c6, queen to f2, castles. I think that if white continued f5 instead, black would have been quite satisfied as well, because after, say, knight f5, bishop f5, e5, rook f5, of course it may appear that white is getting some initiative, but white also has quite a lot of weaknesses of his own. Look at this pawn, it's the pawn on e5, black has some ideas to play d4 and open up the bishop on c6. So after bishop c6, white just played queen to f2, castles, knight to b3, bishop to d7, and one of the typical features or traits of Smyslov's style, he would never really mind to trade queens, especially if that wouldn't worsen his position. He was a world champion, so of course we need to understand when he had an initiative, he would try to keep queens and play for mate. It's not the strong amateur who has some preferences. Of course, he was completely universal as a player. He went queen to c5, which I think is the right move, because it attempts to cover the weakness on c3. And in this position, after queen c5, knight c5, rook c7, white found a way how to almost equalize. I think the weakness on c3 makes his life a bit difficult, even though it seems he has more space. If the pawn was on b2, and the white knight was, say, on d4, white would definitely be the side to pick. White would clearly have some advantage, even though I'm not sure how big this advantage would be. But now white is defending, and white took on d7. The point is that the knight cannot be maintained on c5 for a long time, because black would play b6 anyway, so knight d7, rook d7, ba5, rook a8. These moves were played, and here I think it comes to an interesting positional decision. What should white do? I hope that you have managed to evaluate the position correctly and understand that the pawn on b7 is a weakness as well, just as white pawns in the a file. So, for instance, a normal logical move would have been pawn to c4, let's say. Say black would capture on a5, white can just take here, and then he would probably lose the pawn on a4 shortly after, but the pawn on b7 would, I think, be lost as well. So we would reach some equal endgame. But white made quite a, well, how to say, quite a banal decision. It's just quite a standard idea, but here it's not really working that well. White went a6, trying to get rid of the weakness and to close the a file, but the problem is now black clearly has the initiative. The files get open for the black rooks, and this is why, well, white had to keep this target on b7 to strangle black's pieces quite a bit as well. Takes, rook to d4. Now I think it becomes obvious that the position of the black pawn on a6 is highly beneficial for him, since now the white bishop doesn't have the b5 square. Bishop to e2, knight to d5, g3, knight c3, bishop f3, rook to b8, rook to b3 is a huge threat, I think, because the knight on c3 would have been a piece impossible to ever chase. So white dealt with that threat in the only possible way. He went rook a3, and here black should have simply captured the pawn with knight a4. The point being that after rook a1, black would have an answer rook to b4, just keeping the things protected. And perhaps white wouldn't have many chances to hold. I'm not sure why black wasn't happy about it. Once again, after knight a4, rook b4, say bishop c6, there is knight c5 at least. And one more issue is that even if white managed to get his pawn back, I think he would lose because of the weakness of the second rank. That is incredibly weak. I think white can never defend it. So, yeah, and here, unfortunately, black came up with the wrong solution. He preferred to go knight to b1, followed by knight to d2. He was not sure whether he could take on a4, I think. Rook to f2, knight c4. Of course, black is still better. And one of his ideas, which is rather standard or rather typical of such endgames that arise from French, from Caro-Kann, is to undermine the central pawn on e5 by means of such a move as g5. So, white went h4, preventing g5. What should black do? Your opponent prevented g5, he tried to, but you still can achieve this move, so black should play g5, of course. White just manages to trade a few more pawns. White took here. If white just continued with something like bishop to e2, I think after, for instance, a5, takes, black would keep quite a significant advantage in this endgame, because he can centralize his king, he can tackle this pawn with rook to b4. All these pawns were pretty weak as well, so I don't think it's a good position for white. White took. Knight takes e5, bishop e2, rook to b1, king to g2. Black is of course significantly better. a5, rook to c2, rook to b3. I think that black could have captured instantly on a4. The point being that after rook to c5 we can simply play something like rook to e4, and probably the only issue black had here while deciding for or against such a continuation is that he was afraid of bishop to h5, the only counterplay idea for white. The point being that after something like rook b3, white can try to take, and after knight f7 there is a check, king g7 and rook c7, which is quite an unpleasant idea, of course. However, after king to g6, black manages to escape all the trouble, and white wouldn't be able to do, well, pretty much anything here. If he takes, I think that black can try a few moves. For instance, rook e2 check seems very decent. And later on, if white starts giving checks, if he gives this check, then there's king g5. Instead, if he gives the check on g7, then there's king f5. The king just can try to escape. So this should have been quite convincing. But rook to b3 was played. And here, white had counter chances. White had ideas how to get counterplay. I'd like you to try to find the defensive or counter-attacking ideas for white. How should he continue here in order to save the game? The right move was an active attempt rook to c5. The point being that after, for instance, knight d3, bishop d3, rook a5, rook g3, that is something you can get scared about. After king h2. The draw is more or less obvious because, in fact, black cannot really create any threats. While, for instance, after something like uh, rook to d5 here, rook d5, e d5, rook f5, black can simply play rook e3, but then just king f2, say d4, and now rook f4, and white should be able to hold. But after the move in the game, rook f4, black's next move is way stronger than in the previous line. Rook to d5 is very strong. The point being that the white rook simply didn't get to the 5th rank, so now the pawn on g5 is pretty weak as well in many variations. White on rook e4, king g7, bishop h5, knight g6. Very soon white would just have to transpose to a very bad rook endgame, and pretty soon black just managed to convert rather smoothly. I would demonstrate the next moves pretty fast, however here you need to make the right decision. Please take your time and think. Indeed, it's very strong to just capture with the pawn. White just retreated. Rook e4, black's collecting pretty much all the pawns in the world. White tried king to h3. The last idea, the point being that after f4, king h4, f takes g3, black is, well, being tempted to make a mistake. How should black continue? Indeed, king f5 is the right move. After king g7, the problem is that after king h3, that's a pretty standard theoretical endgame, which is rather drawn, and we would at some point study such positions too. Well, after king f5, rook f6, king e4, the king is just getting active, and after rook to f5, black manages to collect another pawn, trade it for the pawn on his own, and white just found no other solution but to resign in such a situation. So I hope that this video was enjoyable, even though it took way longer than our usual videos. Please leave your comments and tell me what you think about such a format. Once again, this was the game number 1 of the match between Smyslov and Botvinnik in 1954. We already have the game number 2 covered, and we'll continue covering the rest soon. Thanks for your attention.